This week we're talking about communicating with your spouse about sex, and it's the first of a three session sequence. And the subtitle is Going Deeper with the Conversation. Unlike what we've done before, we don't actually have the group in the room. We've already done the group, we already had the discussion, and now we're just recording it afterward for the internet and for people who missed the class, the discussion altogether. So, Going Deeper with the Conversation is the subtitle for this week. In fact, what we did last week is we talked a lot about what it means to set the table. The point is, we got people talking with their spouses about sex. We had this handout with two pages full of detailed, very intimate, very revealing questions that we just urged couples to discuss with each other, because ultimately the backbone of growth for anything in our marriage is communication. And believe it or not, it can be hard for couples to talk about sex. It's very sensitive. And so we urge them to spend a couple hours over the last 2 weeks talking about sex, talking about what was important to each one of them and how they thought it was going and so forth. So here we are, keeping the conversation going. And the first slide was, again, our Christian marriage pyramid. And so we don't really need to review that too much, just to say that the foundation is the way that Susan and I really look at Christian marriage, to help us organize all the different factors that go into it. But the foundation is being great friends, and that's another way of saying love, or agape love. On top of that, we build a layer of being great partners, and that's all the practicalities of marriage that we think of every day. And then the third layer, the pinnacle on top, is being great lovers. And so this sequence of three is really about growing as lovers. The next slide here, we have 5 words on the slide. And the question is, how do these relate? The first 2 are intimacy and affection. How do those relate to the third word, which is sex? And then how do intimacy, affection, and sex relate with these 2 words, connection and bonding? Right. So we had a good discussion with people. What were the observations that people came up with?
They recognize, I thought one comment was really good, just about, in general friendship, you want connection, you want bonding, you want affection, you want, intimacy. But the sexual aspect is something that's very unique to a marriage. You can have the other 4 just in some friendships that are very deep. But when you pull the sex component into it, that's reserved exclusively for marriage.
Right. And in fact, I think the value of talking about the relationship between these words is we sometimes don't remember the other words when we're talking or thinking about sex.
Right. You can just get into the act and not think about what leads to the act, and then what sex produces.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the big thing for me from this slide were twofold. The first is that if one of the partners is focusing on sex and missing out on building a relationship where intimacy and affection are functioning and firing on all cylinders, then they're too focused on sex. And you've got to have the intimacy and affection as precursors to really great sex in marriage.
Yeah.
So I think that was the first thing that I think was an important concept for everyone to know, to understand. And then the second thing is to remember what it is that you're doing during sex. What is the outcome? What is the benefit? What is the product? And I think these 2 words capture that connection and bonding are 2 things that sex is supposed to produce in a marriage. And of course, to produce it in a different way than you can be bonded with a friend. or anyone else in the world, that you gain a connection. And in fact, yeah, it's a man-woman thing as well, that I can't be connected with you any other way. I can't be connected with you in this way, in any other way than through sex.
Right.
And I can't be bonded with you in this way, in any other way, but through sex.
Right.
And so, so the importance to me, and this is why I created the slide this way, is that we want to be unified, that this is what we're doing, that we not only need the intimacy and affection to have great sex, but through sex, what we're doing is creating a connection and a bond, one with another.
Yeah.
So there's no sense of let's just get to the sex and let's get the sex over with. It's not just about sex. Sex is never just about sex. It's about the relationship.
Right.
It's about being truly bonded.
Right.
Any other final comments there?
No, I can't think of anything else.
Okay, let's move on. We had encouraged people to really be involved in conversations
Yes.
with their spouse the last 2 weeks in between sessions. And so this slide was really talking about how have the discussions gone. And I know that several people shared, I mean, by and large, I think the discussions went well.
Right.
People were
Right.
equipped well based on the first session. They were given that sheet with discussion questions,
Right.
which really helped them. And I think the something that we experienced was that our first really substantial discussion that we had over the last 2 weeks about our sex life, because we're trying to talk about things that we haven't talked about and that are sensitive, sometimes it can focus on the negative.
Right.
And I know that although we did important stuff in terms of being candid and being vulnerable and being being candid and vulnerable during the conversation, it sort of ended up with kind of a negative tone. And so I didn't want that. I recognized that, didn't want that. And so I created this slide really for our discussion this week as we reflect on it, that we don't want to let our communication on difficult topics turn the relationship negative.
Right. Right.
And oh, by the way, no one wants to make love if they're having negative feelings.
Right.
So one of the things that I felt is that I might have discouraged you by talking about things that maybe had been hard for me to express for a long time, or things that maybe I felt you hadn't quite fully understood about me. And so I spent then our second significant session, that was Thursday night, making sure I really, really expressed my gratitude
Right.
to you, my appreciation for you, and how wonderful our love life has been for the 33 years of our marriage, because it has, on balance, been fantastic. I super appreciate it.
Yeah.
And the communication work that we do to get at some additional points that are painful or that need to be talked about. We don't want to let that get to dominate. We don't want to let that turn the discussion negative. We want to. So I realized that I wanted to make sure that you felt really built up.
Right.
You felt appreciated. You felt that you knew that I was grateful, and that I wasn't complaining.
Right.
Because complaining does
Yes.
not produce good things.
Right. And a theme that we've had throughout this whole course is, well, not things that are negative, but just looking at things for growth opportunities.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah. So these were growth opportunities, and we did not want them to have a negative slant.
Right.
So that was this slide. And I think once we shared that, several other people did mention that, oh yeah, we had kind of a difficulties in our first discussion.
Right.
And then we got back on track.
Right.
All right. And then we talked about the desire gap.
Right.
And the desire gap, I'm just going to read the slide here, right? Who wants it more and who wants it more often?
Right.
And the fact is, it's very common in marriage for there to be a desire gap where both partners don't want sex as much, the same amount
Right.
to each other. And it's typical that the man wants it more than the wife. That's typical. It's not always that way. It's very important that, right, there may be people listening to this where it's the wife who wants sex more than the husband. That's completely possible. If we generalize it that the husband wants it more, then that should not belittle anyone who's in the opposite situation.
Yes.
Everybody's unique. Everybody's individual. Every couple is individual and special in its own ways. So I do think that in our relationship, I'm the higher desire partner,
Right.
and you're
Yes.
the lower desire partner, and that's okay. That's normal. It's completely normal. We've been married 33 years. We've had kids. We've gone through all kinds of many things that we talked about last week.
Right.
That cause the circumstances for sexual opportunities to change
Right.
in marriage. We talked about that last week. So here's another line on the slide. It says, is there a difference between the two of you about how often you would like to make love? And how do you handle that? So those were good discussion questions right off the discussion question sheet that we handed out last week.
Right.
So we had a great discussion
Right.
about this. I mean, I thought all the comments were done, and then there were more people that wanted to comment.
Right.
Any comments on the comments from today's discussion?
No, well, it's like there's a gap. That's very common. I mean, even today with the conversations, that's just the way it is. And it gives us an opportunity to learn to talk and figure out how to meet each other in the middle. And and then the question about how do you handle that in this conversation, and meeting each other in the middle. And it's best if you figure out a compromise rather than one just giving in to the other, so to speak.
Yes. In fact, of the 10 couples, there was one couple that said, yeah, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's her who wants it more. So they seem to be reasonably evenly matched.
Right.
But they recognized that at different times it was actually, one or the other. 8 or 9 of the couples, I forget exactly how many we had today, were the husband was the higher desire partner, and then one of the couples, it seemed like the wife was the higher desire partner. So anyway, and the real question is, how do you handle that?
Right.
And you made the point that we talked about compromise.
Right.
We talked about discussing candidly what people's preferences, what the different partners' preferences would be in terms of frequency.
Right.
Some discussion about that. We talked about simply asking the question, husband, what would your ideal frequency be for making love? And get that number. And then wife, what's your ideal frequency?
Right.
For making love, and then compromising a bit.
Right.
And someone made the really good comment that we shouldn't be too focused on number of times per week, because what if you don't have that week? Or then it shouldn't turn into its own problem. just because you were trying to solve a problem.
Right.
And we talked about, yes, that this is just so that you can set expectations, and perhaps you can do your weekly planning. And so that you can say, okay, if we're going to make love twice in a week, then where do we find that? Right? On which nights would we be able to do that? And I know we do weekly planning.
Right.
So sometimes one night is available, and in another week that night is not. That weeknight, the evening is not available.
Right.
So we have to look at what will work for the
Right.
week that we're facing.
Right.
And then there was a brief discussion about scheduled sex, and just that some people don't like scheduled sex. They want to focus on spontaneous sex, and it's just that.
Well, I thought your comment was good, that scheduled sex is better than no sex.
Yeah.
And if it has to be scheduled, then that's okay, because you don't want to fall in the trap of no sex.
Yeah, that's right. So that basically rounded out how many slides we got to in this week. Then we looked at what's coming up for the next session. We're going to talk about the orgasm gap, and how, and again, this is that husbands need to pay special attention to make sure that their wives are able to have as many orgasms as they want, because it's a common problem that husbands can be selfish because they're more automatic in their orgasms, and it takes a lot more, let's say, patience and care to help the wife typically to have an orgasm. So anyway, we're going to talk about that next week. Another slide was about when your spouse initiates. How do you say yes? What's a good way to say yes? And what are some less than good ways to say yes? And in fact, someone said, come on, be straight with it. There's some bad ways to say yes. Like, all right, let's get this over with.
Right.
But we'll talk about that next week or in 2 weeks. And then there are bad ways to say no. Like, no, I'm too tired and I got a headache. Anyway, there's a whole attitude. Do we have to? And must we? Or is that all you think about? Right? Those are not great ways to say no. And there are better ways to say no. Like, well, I would love to, but I'm not able to.
Yeah.
I'm not. How about if we roll to tomorrow night? So it's more of a not yet than a no. So anyway, we're going to talk about that next week, and then we're going to talk about how are men and women different when it comes to how they approach sex.